That bag of potato chips sitting in your kitchen cabinet isn't puffed up with regular air. It is pumped full of nitrogen gas. That canister of coffee on your shelf was purged with nitrogen right before the lid was sealed tight. The beef jerky stuffed inside your camping backpack was packaged in a pure nitrogen environment. The walnuts, the trail mix, the whey protein, the boxed pasta, essentially anything you buy in a sealed wrapper meant to last more than a couple of weeks was flooded with nitrogen gas before leaving the processing plant. The commercial food sector has relied on nitrogen flushing to keep products fresh since the 1930s. It remains the most powerful preservation method ever invented for dry and semi-dry goods. It beats vacuum packing, outshines oxygen absorbers, outperforms moisture desiccants, and works better than any synthetic chemical preservative ever mixed into our meals. By using nitrogen, dry foods last 10 to 25 times longer than if they were just packed in regular air. It locks in the original taste, crunch, hue, and vitamins better than anything else. You don't need synthetic additives, you don't need a fridge, and you don't need complex machinery, just a nitrogen source and an airtight vessel. You can replicate this in your own kitchen for about $3. Yet the commercial packaging sector has utilized this trick in virtually every facility making shelf-stable goods for 9 decades. And over those 9 decades of nutritional labels, ingredient breakdowns, and public awareness campaigns, not one major corporation has ever confessed that the magic behind their long-lasting food is just a gas you can pick up at a local brewing supply shop for the cost of a hamburger. The worldwide packaged food empire pulls in over $2 trillion every single year. Modified atmosphere packaging, the industrial term that covers nitrogen flushing, protects roughly 60% of all packaged groceries purchased in America. The very method keeping the majority of the nation's pantry staples fresh can be yours for $3, yet it remains intentionally hidden from the everyday shoppers who fill their carts each week. This is the truth behind nitrogen food preservation, the commercial safeguard that has been staring you in the face from every snack bag and coffee tin for almost a century. Welcome back. If uncovering these truths is important to you, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. We pride ourselves on prying open the doors they prefer to keep locked. Let's rewind to the origin of this massive secret. We're going to a Chicago meat processing plant in the year 1928. The American meatpacking conglomerates of the 1920s were battling a persistent issue that bled millions of dollars in ruined inventory each year. Fresh cuts and cured meats were going bad incredibly fast during transit and warehousing, even when kept cold. The culprit was oxygen trapped inside the wrappers, which fueled both the aerobic bacteria responsible for rot and the oxidative reactions that caused the meat to turn a nasty brown and smell rancid. Keeping things cold only delayed the inevitable. It didn't solve it. The corporations desperately needed a packaging fix that attacked the oxygen issue head-on. The breakthrough came from a pair of USDA Bureau of Animal Industry scientists, Dr. Aaron Hine and Dr. J.C. Thornton. In a 1928 internal brief, they detailed what happened when they swapped out the oxygen in meat packaging for carbon dioxide. The outcome was staggering. Meat kept in a carbon dioxide environment experienced bacterial reproduction at rates roughly 10 times slower than meat exposed to standard air at identical temperatures. Though kept as a confidential USDA study for several years, this data eventually leaked into the commercial packaging sector. Food scientists at Swift & Company, one of the massive Chicago meatpackers, took note and built the first commercial carbon dioxide wrapping system for raw beef by 1933. Nitrogen finally made its debut thanks to researchers at the Continental Can Company in the late 1930s, who were trying to perfect nitrogen-flush tins for the coffee industry. Coffee oxidation, where roasted beans lose their complex flavors and develop bitter, stale notes upon hitting the air, was the biggest hurdle for commercial coffee brands. Exposed coffee grounds go noticeably bad in mere days and become totally undrinkable in a few weeks. Continental Can's nitrogen-flushed coffee tins, which hit the market in 1938, pushed the shelf life of ground coffee from a few weeks to multiple years without altering the roast, the grind, or the bean itself. The nitrogen simply did all the heavy lifting. Then came World War II, sparking the most critical and heavily recorded rollout of modified atmosphere packaging we have ever seen. The United States military required combat rations that could survive for years, not weeks. They needed food that could be manufactured, transported, and stockpiled in steaming jungles, freezing tundras, and scorching deserts without any refrigeration. By 1942, the Army Quartermaster Corps Research and Development Command at the Natick Labs in Massachusetts initiated a massive project to develop vacuum-sealed and nitrogen-purged ration kits. By 1944, pumping nitrogen into packages was the standard protocol for the biscuits, sweets, nuts, and dehydrated fruits found in C and K rations. The exact same technology that kept Allied troops fed in the Pacific Theater is what keeps the chips fresh in your cupboard today. Following the war, the food industry rapidly embraced this modified atmosphere technique throughout the 50s and 60s as packaging materials improved, and industrial gas providers made nitrogen widely accessible. By 1970, flushing packages with nitrogen was the baseline standard across the snack, coffee, nut, and dried goods sectors. By 1990, modified atmosphere packaging had infiltrated almost every single category of shelf-stable groceries. Yet throughout this massive 60-year expansion, the food industry's marketing departments never once bothered to tell consumers what nitrogen flushing actually was, why they relied on it, or that everyday people could easily do it at home. Now let me break down exactly why nitrogen keeps food fresh so perfectly, and why every gadget they market for your home kitchen is a second-rate stand-in for their own secret weapon. Food goes bad through three main pathways, and all three share one vital requirement: oxygen. The first pathway is oxidative rancidity. This happens when oxygen attacks the fats and oils in your food, generating the chemical compounds that taste incredibly stale and smell foul. Any food containing fat, whether it's nuts, crackers, chips, dried meats, or seeds, suffers this the moment it meets standard air. At our normal atmospheric oxygen level of 21%, high-fat foods start turning in a matter of days, producing undeniably rancid flavors within a few weeks. The second pathway is aerobic microbial growth. This is the rapid explosion of bacteria and molds that literally eat your food and leave behind toxic byproducts. Molds absolutely demand oxygen to survive. That fuzzy growth on bread, cheese, and dried fruit simply cannot take root in an oxygen-free zone, no matter how warm or moist the environment gets. The exact same rule applies to the aerobic bacteria responsible for rotting fresh foods. Take away the oxygen and their reproduction halts completely. The third pathway is enzymatic oxidation. These are internal chemical reactions driven by the food's own enzymes. They cause cut fruits to turn brown, strip the flavor from legumes, and degrade the vibrant colors of your groceries. But these enzymes are powerless without oxygen acting as a co-pilot. Cut off the oxygen supply and these reactions freeze in place, regardless of the moisture content. Nitrogen shuts down all three of these mechanisms with one simple intervention. It completely displaces the oxygen inside the package. Nitrogen already makes up 78% of the air we naturally breathe, and it is entirely inert. It doesn't interact chemically with your food, it leaves zero trace on flavor, color, or texture, and it is completely harmless at any level you could ever encounter. When food is sealed inside a pure nitrogen environment, the oxygen level plummets to somewhere between 0.5% and 2%. That is well below the danger zone where rancidity, mold, bacteria, and enzymatic decay can survive. When you stack nitrogen against the commercial alternatives, its dominance is glaringly obvious. Vacuum sealing tries to pull oxygen out entirely. It works, but it relies on perfect structural seals that often warp or fail over time. Oxygen absorbers, those little iron packets you find in beef jerky, can drop oxygen levels incredibly low, but they are single-use, they generate heat when activated, and they ruin anything containing liquid or packed in metal. Standard desiccants only tackle moisture, ignoring the oxygen entirely. And chemical preservatives face growing health scrutiny while doing nothing to stop microbial rot. Nitrogen, however, beats the vacuum seal's final oxygen count, is infinitely reusable, generates zero heat, works flawlessly with any food type or packaging material, and adds absolutely zero synthetic chemicals to your diet. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Food Science tested mixed nuts across 4 distinct storage setups: standard room temperature air, vacuum sealed, packed with oxygen absorbers, and nitrogen flushed. After 2 solid years in storage, the nitrogen flushed nuts had peroxide levels, the main chemical indicator of rancidity, 12 times lower than the batches left in the air, and 3 times lower than the vacuum sealed ones. A blind taste test panel found the nitrogen nuts to be completely indistinguishable from freshly shelled ones. Every single other method showed detectable flavor loss within just 12 months. Here is where the narrative takes a very cynical turn. The corporate silence surrounding nitrogen preservation is not an accident. It is a calculated communication blackout designed to protect massive profit margins on multiple fronts. To understand this, you have to look at the economics of packaged food. These products rely heavily on the illusion of inherent freshness. The consumer's belief that the premium product they are paying top dollar for is naturally pristine. What they absolutely will not put on the label is an explanation of the mechanical gas trick actually keeping that food edible. If the food industry admitted to the public that potato chips stay crispy for 6 months solely because the bag is pumped full of nitrogen, the consumer would start asking very uncomfortable questions about what exactly they are paying for. The nitrogen isn't a premium ingredient. It is a cheap packaging variable applied to generic and high-end goods alike. More importantly, revealing this would give the average person the power to preserve their own food better than the corporations do. If you realize you can buy bulk coffee, grains, and nuts and flush them at home for $3, the massive markups on pre-packaged groceries instantly evaporate. You are paying for the shiny bag and the modified atmosphere inside it. Expose the gas and their premium pricing model crumbles. This orchestrated silence also props up an entirely separate industry. Home vacuum sealers pull in roughly $400 million a year in American retail sales. Oxygen absorbers fuel massive profits for dozens of emergency preparedness brands. These markets thrive strictly because the public doesn't realize that a superior, cheaper, and endlessly reusable alternative is sitting right down the street at their local brewing supply store. But this knowledge didn't disappear completely. It survived among homesteaders, doomsday preppers, and the laboratories where serious food science actually happens. The long-term emergency storage community has quietly championed home nitrogen flushing for decades. Off-grid living advocates routinely boast about storing wheat berries, rice, and beans for up to 30 years using this method. The LDS Church, which has pushed detailed food preservation guidelines for over a century, explicitly recommends nitrogen-flushed dry goods for achieving multi-decade shelf life, utilizing the gas heavily in their massive community storage centers. The high-end coffee world knows this trick intimately. Premium roasters exclusively use nitrogen-flushed bags with specialized one-way valves to protect their delicate, freshly roasted beans. They understand nitrogen's magic better than any other consumer group, to the point where some specialty shops now sell small nitrogen canisters directly to their customers for home use. And the craft brewing community? They already have the entire supply chain ready to go. The exact same nitrogen tank and regulator a home brewer uses to purge a keg is perfectly suited to flush a bucket of dry rice. The infrastructure is sitting right there in the home brew aisle. Nobody ever bothered to connect it to standard pantry storage. Consider the rural Kentucky homesteader who ran a 10-year experiment, posting her results online in 2021 to massive attention. She sealed identical batches of white rice, oats, hard wheat, and pinto beans in 5 different ways, including standard air, vacuum sealed, and nitrogen flushed. A full decade later, independent taste testers declared the nitrogen-flushed food completely indistinguishable from fresh off the shelf. Everything else tasted noticeably degraded or entirely stale. The total price tag for her nitrogen method, 14 cents per pound of food. Here's exactly how you do it. 14 cents a pound for a decade of freshness. Option 1, small canisters for everyday items. If you want to protect your expensive coffee, spices, or a jar of expensive nuts, grab a small nitrogen canister meant for wine preservation. You can find them at wine shops or online for about $10, giving you around 100 uses. Just spray 2 or 3 short bursts into your mason jar and slap the airtight lid on immediately. Because nitrogen is heavier than oxygen and comes out pressurized, it forces the oxygen out of the jar before you seal it. Ground coffee kept this way stays at peak flavor for up to 8 weeks instead of going bitter in 3 days. Properly flushed nuts will stay perfect at room temperature for up to 2 full years. Option 2, the bulk storage cylinder. If you are serious about putting away gallons of rice, beans, flour, pasta, or sugar, you need a small aluminum nitrogen tank from a homebrew shop. The setup costs roughly $30, and refills are incredibly cheap, usually under $10. One single tank can flush up to 100-gallon-sized buckets. Your cost drops to just pennies per pound. You just fill a food-grade Mylar bag or a bucket with a heavy-duty lid, leaving an inch at the top. Stick a hose attached to your regulator right down to the bottom of the food. Turn the valve on low. You aren't trying to pressurize the bucket. Just gently push the air out. Let it flow for about a minute per gallon of space, pull the hose, and seal it tight immediately. You now have a flawless, oxygen-free time capsule. This works brilliantly for dry goods. Rice, hard wheat, dried corn, and beans will last 25 years or more. Oats will go a decade. Sugar and salt become practically immortal. Coffee beans stay vibrant for 5 years. Do not use this for fresh fruits and vegetables. Those always need the fridge. Don't use it for moist foods where dangerous anaerobic bacteria can thrive, and don't use it for live culture foods like yogurt, because the nitrogen will suffocate the good bacteria. For perfect quality control, drop a 5-cent oxygen indicator packet inside before sealing. These little tags are pink when safe and turn colorless, or vice versa depending on the brand, to warn you if oxygen gets back in. If the color shifts, your seal broke. If it doesn't, your food is frozen in time. Compare the hard costs. A standard vacuum sealer runs you up to $100, plus endless expensive plastic bags, giving you a modest extension in shelf life. Absorbers cost money every single time you seal a jar. A nitrogen cylinder costs almost nothing after the initial purchase, requires 0 disposable parts, and stretches shelf life by up to 25 times. Before we wrap up, I want you to go look at that bag of chips on your kitchen counter one last time. Notice the puff. You've seen that inflated bag your entire life, probably assuming it was just empty air or a deceptive trick to make the portion look bigger. It is not air. It is nitrogen. The exact same gas making up the vast majority of every breath you take. The identical gas NASA uses to flush highly volatile rocket fuel lines. The exact same invisible barrier the massive food conglomerates have been quietly pumping into our groceries for 90 years. That chip bag is a high-tech scientific demonstration disguised as a cheap snack. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that a practically free gas can protect fragile oils and delicate flavors from rotting away in a matter of days. That undeniable proof has been sitting inside your house since the day you were born. The explanation for what you were actually holding was simply never provided. They didn't hide nitrogen flushing because it's toxic, dangerous, or legally patented. Nitrogen is the most abundant element in our atmosphere. They kept it quiet because the very second consumers realized the greatest preservation tool on Earth costs 14 cents a pound and can be bought down the street, their entire empire of overpriced packaging completely loses its magic. But a secret this massive can never stay fully buried. It is literally inflating millions of packages in every single supermarket on the planet, just waiting in plain sight for someone to finally ask the question that 90 years of corporate marketing has desperately tried to prevent. What is actually in there, and why can't I do it myself? If this video finally gave you that answer, hit subscribe and share it right now. Every single share is a crack in a $2 trillion monopoly, and every new subscription keeps us digging deep into the vaults they thought they locked away forever.